Jews in this turn against liberty. The foundational virtue of this country is bad for Jews is as self-evident as it once was to declare that Lincoln was a hero, or Frederick Douglass was a second founding father, or that America is the last best hope on earth. And that is because, and if you have eyes to see, you will see this, where liberty thrives, Jews thrive. Where difference, real difference, is celebrated, Jews are celebrated. Where freedom of thought and faith and speech are protected, Jews are the safest. And when such virtues are regarded as threats, Jews will be regarded as the same. In other words, when people turn against freedom, they turn against us. So it shouldn't surprise any of us that our safety, as well as our freedom, are contracting for us right now in real time. And not just for Jews, of course, but anyone who refuses to surrender truth. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you. I'm honored to be on this stage and to be giving this historic lecture. And in this, I stand on the shoulders of giants. Not literally, of course. Natan Sharansky, who gave this talk, is 5'2". Elie Wiesel was 5'6" tall, and Lucy Davidovich, the great Holocaust historian, was, in her own words, 5'0". Literally tiny, but figuratively enormous. Small but mighty, a lot like the Jewish people. Though it is fashionable today to turn Jews into the Goliath, we remain the tribe of David, who as a shepherd boy said to the giant, "You come to me with a sword, you come to me with a spear, you come to me with a shield, but I come to you in the name of God." If David were around in 2024, he would surely be accused of using disproportionate force. In any event, I am humbled to be here where so many of my heroes have once stood, and in the presence of so many beloved friends and teachers. For much of my adult life, and especially since the earthquake of October 7th, and the aftershocks that have continued daily since then, I have been blessed beyond measure in having friends far wiser and far learned than me. Conversations with Alana Newhouse, Michael Oren, Mati Friedman, Mika Goodman, Leah Leibowitz, Aviv Gur, Michael Eisenberg, Samuel Raskoff, Ruth Weiss, Rabbi Meir Soloveitchik, Rabbi Noah Kushner, Rabbi David Wolpe, and of course Rabbi David Ingber, all informed this talk. And the brilliant Jonathan Rosen was, as always, especially instrumental. So was someone whose voice speaks to us from the world to come, Rabbi Jonathan Sachs. I mention all of these names less for their sake than for yours, because if you want to make sense of the upside-down moment that we're in, these voices and their work should be your guide. I also want to thank the 92nd Street Y for making sure that this talk happened, despite some of the chaos you saw outside. Now, this talk was originally open to the public, but it had to be made invite-only at the advice of the NYPD. And in that, it's painfully emblematic of our moment. One in which American Jews, having lived as if we were immune from history, find ourselves in the belly of the beast once more. It is a moment in which the realities that seemed reserved for Jews of other times and other places are all of a sudden very much our own. My friend Alana likes to joke that the only thing worse than a dumb Jew is a surprise Jew. And yet, even many of us credited with seeing it coming have been in a state of shock. Why? I can tell you why, because I'm one of them. I knew anti-Semitism had seduced educated people in other eras, but I couldn't have foreseen the tsunami of anti-Semitism that would originate with the most educated in our own. I knew that many of our sense-making institutions, higher education, journalism, even some of our biggest corporations had become bloated and corrupt. Don't forget, I used to work at the New York Times. But even I didn't foresee how avidly so many of those institutions would actively embrace an ideology of illiberalism. I knew people still hated Jews and that hate was deadly. I knew that intimately. I stood inside the building at Tree of Life as the Federal Commission worked alongside the FBI to pick up the pieces of the 11 Jews who were murdered there that October morning. So I knew that never existed. But I couldn't have foreseen how mainstream, how shameless, even how proud that hate would become. I thought America was a different kind of diaspora. One where Jew hatred truly existed, just as other forms of bigotry unfortunately do wherever human beings live, but where it could never fully take root, as it did throughout history everywhere else. And of course I thought that. This is a country whose first president, in 1790, wrote a letter to the Hebrew congregation in Newport, Rhode Island, saying that the Jews of America would, quote, possess alike liberty of conscience and immunities of citizenship. Washington went on, it is now no more that toleration is spoken of, as if it was by the indulgence of one class of people that another enjoyed the exercise of their inherent natural rights. George Washington's radical proposition was that Jews in America would not be, as they have always been in history, second-class citizens in New Jerusalem. Rather, freedom would be as natural to Jews as it would be to any other citizen, or at least any other American then recognized as fully human. The Civil War, thought to make America's promise more real, was still 71 years away. So fully did America's founders identify with the Israelites that Benjamin Franklin wanted the image on America's Great Seal to be Moses parting the Red Sea. Abraham Lincoln has ever put it perfectly. Americans, he said, are the almost chosen people. All of this is why, as the German writer Joseph Jaffe has noted, America is dotted with biblical place names like Jerusalem and Shiloh and Zion and Canaan and Goshen, that there is no Shiloh anywhere in Europe. For all of these reasons and more, I thought we were immune. What made us immune was not something permanent. It wasn't something special in our soil. It wasn't the pedigree of our pioneers. It wasn't our proximity to power. What made America immune were our ideas, the rule of law and equality under it, a God who made us all equal. Rights not granted to us by a king or by a government, but rights that were self-evident because they were endowed by our Creator. What made and makes this country exceptional are our ideas, our fealty to those ideas, and our willing to fight for those ideas. If we lose sight of them, or worse, if we allow war to be made against them from within, then of course we can become like anywhere else. The founders themselves anticipated this possibility. Here's how Alexander Hamilton put it in the first Federalist paper. It seems to have been reserved to the people of this country, by their conduct and example, to decide the important question, and that question is this: whether societies of men are really capable or not of establishing good government from reflection and choice, or whether they are forever destined to depend for their political constitutions on accident and force. That urgent existential question is now before us once more. Are we capable? What will we choose? Now this talk is called The State of World Jewry. But if there is a lesson of these past few years, and especially of these past 142 days, it is that the state of world Jewry depends on the state of the free world. And right now, its condition is in jeopardy. This is a truth known viscerally to Jews today who hail from the unfree world, those from the former Soviet Union, those who were expelled from Iran and other autocratic regimes in the Middle East. And it is a truth today, faced by Jews in places that remain unfree. Just ask the Jews of Tunisia, who in October watched as a historic synagogue was reduced to rubble by a mob driven by false reports that Israel had intentionally bombed a hospital in Gaza. But it is a truth that we American Jews have lost sight of on account of our abundant blessings. But as our holiday from history clearly has ended, and as we learn how to live inside history once more, it is a truth we urgently need to revive and renew and make real for ourselves again. So that is what I want to talk about tonight. How we must become, inside and outside, free people, for the sake of America, for the sake of the free world, and for the sake of the Jewish people, those who came before us and those yet to come. Now the Jews are in the wilderness. Well, that's where we find our ancestors, the Israelites, in the part of the Torah we're in the midst of reading right now. This coming Shabbat, we will hear one of the most iconic and troubling stories in the Hebrew Bible. I suspect you know the one. When the people saw that Moses was so long in coming down from the mountain, they gathered against Aaron and said to him, "Come, make us a god who shall go before us. For that fellow Moses, the man who brought us out of Egypt, we don't know what has happened to him." And they immediately get to work. Aaron tells the Israelites to take off their gold, take off the rings of their wives and their daughters and their bracelets. They melt down the jewelry and they make for themselves a golden calf. And they make offerings to it. They dance in front of it, and they cry out before the idol they have made, "This is your God, O Israel, who brought you out of the land of Egypt." Linger on that for a minute. They looked at a statue, which they knew they had just made with their own hands, and gave it credit for an otherworldly miracle. And not one that had happened to others, one that they had experienced firsthand. At the very least, they knew the cow hadn't been there. And so the question, of course, is why? Why did they do it? Why did a people who had experienced the miracle of their liberation from slavery turn away from the God that had given them their freedom and toward a calf? The rabbis provide many answers, of course, but so does the Israeli singer Ehud Banai. These are the lyrics from the song he sings about that story. "We are here in the heart of the desert, thirsty for living water. You're on the top of the mountain above the clouds, and there is no sign, no signal. So many days in a closed circuit we circle around the golden calf. There's no one to hit the rock. Who will give direction?" So why did they do it? They did it because they felt anxious and vulnerable and alone. They did it because they were desperate. They did it because they wanted temporary pleasure. They did it because they lost, or they thought they had lost, their connection to God. They did it because they didn't have the ability to imagine or conceive of a different future. They did it because they had come from a place that worshipped idols, and so they imitated the culture they had grown up with. They reverted to what they knew. They imitated that dominant culture, even though that culture had enslaved them. And was that so crazy? Not a moment ago, these people had been slaves. They may have dreamed during their long night of slavery of being a free people in our own land, as the words of the Hatikva would put it 4,000 or so years later. That wasn't the same as waking up inside a totally new conception, inside a totally new paradigm. That wasn't the same as being asked to leave behind everything about the world they knew, to become a free people, free with all of the immense privileges, but also the terrifying responsibilities that freedom comes with. So why did the Israelites build the calf? Because freedom is so very, very hard. And what about Aaron? Aaron was Moses' right hand. Aaron knew better. But Aaron capitulates. Aaron has the people hand over their gold, the Torah says, so he can fashion the mold. He facilitates their idolatry. So why does Aaron do it? Again, the rabbis offer many explanations. He did it, they say, because he was playing for time, trying to keep the Israelites satisfied until Moses reemerged from the mountain. He did it because he was afraid. Maybe because he was afraid of the mob that would turn against him. He was afraid of what would happen if he didn't accommodate their desires. He did it because he refused to accept or perhaps couldn't cope with the fact that the world was in fact changing, and that he and this tiny group of people could in fact be living inside history on the cusp of cataclysmic change. More than that, maybe even the generators of that change. So when his flock yearned for the past, he allowed them to slip back into it. He allowed them to turn back down a dead end, to turn back toward a dead world, rather than insist on going forward and forging a new one. So there it is, all of it, in a few spare lines written a few thousand years ago. But I want to suggest to you that it is now, and it is us. They are us. I say that because I believe that we modern Israelites have also been worshiping false gods. Our American idols are prestige and power and social acceptance and popularity and elite opinion and the Ivy League, but I repeat myself. Our idols are the coveted board seat, the best table, relationships with the pretty people. We put truth on the altar as if it were a tithable commodity so that we can remain insiders, so that we can retain bragging rights. We have been willing to sacrifice that which is most precious to us, including our own children, for the sake of it. So why are we doing this? We are doing this because we are a tiny minority, and because we feel vulnerable and scared and alone, and because fitting in feels safer than standing apart. We're doing it because we're Jews, but we're also just human beings, and we seek temporary pleasure and ease. We are doing it because we feel anxious and unsure. We are doing it because we tell ourselves that accommodation is the best route, of course, to protection and safety. We are doing it because we live in a culture of idolatry, only this time the materials are pixels and diplomas, adherence to a particular ideology, or an emergent social credit system based on likes and retweets. We are doing it because maybe deep down, we stop believing that we're capable of more. But in the end, we are doing it because freedom, true, real freedom, is very, very hard. And what about our errands? Why do so many charged with leading our community not offer true leadership, but coping mechanisms? Perhaps because they're afraid.